Please join in moment of silence. Please be seated. Remember to silence your cell phones if you have them. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. I'll second the motion by Radig. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Items 2 through 6 constitute a consent agenda of routine action items to be considered by one motion. Items passed unanimously unless a separate vote is requested by a board member. Item 2 is approval of the minutes of the October 29th meeting. Item 3 is approval of the claims. Item 4 from Human Resources is the approval of memorandum of personnel transactions. We had a replacement copy signed with some lowered amounts due to a clerical correction, I believe. Did you want to address anything else?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
For the memorandum, we also have an appointment for Donald Armstrong as a captain. As you remember, I think last summer, Sheriff Sheehan had a few deputies approved because of some retirements. Well, this is, for training purposes, this is Armstrong is taking a captain position, so he can train before he retires in a few months. So there'll be 2 in that one position. Okay.
Any questions on that? All right, item 5 from the county treasurer is to approve the property tax refund request for parcel ending in 3020 in the amount of $68. Item 6 from secondary roads is approval of permit to work in the right of way for Mitch Parker. And I'll move the consent agenda. Second by Radig. Hearing no discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. I'll now recess the Board of Supervisors meeting and convene the Bennett McDonald Levy and Wolf Creek Drainage District Trustees meeting with item 7, approval of the minutes of the October 29th meeting. I'll move it.
Second.
Second by Taylor. Is there any discussion, correction, notes? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. I'll now adjourn the Bennett McDonald Levy and Wolf Creek Drainage District Trustees meeting and continue the Board of Supervisors meeting with item 8 for action from secondary roads. This is approval of a contract for project parent K-19 bridge replacement project with Dixon Construction for $355,091.40.
Recommend approval of the contract. This is to replace a bridge on Michigan Avenue that's been closed for about 6 years.
I'll second the motion by Radig.
When will, I think you said earlier that work might start yet this fall since it's a steel bridge, or you think it'll be pushed
Dixon
back?
hasn't told us when he
Okay.
wants to start yet, so as soon as I know, I'll let you know.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Thank you. Item 9 from the Board of Supervisors, myself for action. This is approval of standardized MOU template and procedures to ensure the same improved benefit in the employee handbook regarding sick leave payment and health insurance upon retirement is available to all 6 Woodbury County unions. This item is submitted following the discussion and consensus last week to do what this item does, which is to make sure that the different counties bargaining units, with the exception of the deputies union, which is code required to have this language in their contract in order to give this same benefit that we gave to wage plan to the union employees. In an effort to make sure this is consistent in practice and not just in theory, I'm recommending a motion which will allow the Human Resources Director to distribute this template, which has been generated after consulting our labor attorney. And as far as the strategy there, it will ensure consistency by making sure that these groups that do sign this MOU template will abide by the county's handbook which at this time is superior, and the board obviously has no plans to adjust that in any negative fashion. I also recommend that we, as a board, agree here to place these MOUs once signed back on the board agenda for signing at the same time in order to avoid any sort of situation where things are added or things are changed and MOUs differ from bargaining unit to bargaining unit. Is this okay with the board?
Yeah, looks good. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
I appreciate you typing this up, Matthew. The only thing I would say is that it says 6 unions in places and 5 unions in others.
Yes, that's because the deputies union is code required to bargain on this language, and so we cannot remove that from there.
Sure. Okay.
But did want to include that they are part of the 6 that
Okay.
so we're not taking action on 6, we're taking action technically on 5.
Sure. Okay, just wanted to make sure. Thank you for getting this done. I don't think we should have any problems to getting this across the finish line, so.
I agree, thank you. Any comments? I'll move to approve the attached MOU template to authorize the Human Resources Director to distribute it to the 5 county bargaining units, which can be improved by the Employee Handbook's October 29th revision regarding sick leave payment upon retirement, and to place all MOUs on the same agenda for county approval after all 5 MOUs have been signed by all 5 bargaining units for consistency.
Second.
Second by Nelson. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item 10 from the Board of Supervisors, Mr. Nelson and Bittinger for action is to give direction to planning and zoning to review minimum dimensions for single-family dwellings.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this comes from the board concerns last week, and I put Supervisor Bittinger on here since he's the zoning liaison from the board, but this comes from a call that we had from a rural landowner that wanted to build a home, and the home did not meet the minimum dimensions that's currently laid out under Woodbury County zoning from 2008, that the home has to be 23 feet by 23 feet dimensionally. The irony is that the home that they wanted to build was 1,120 square feet, and our minimum square footage requirement, our current zoning is 529. So there's a fallacy here. I don't think, to quote Jeremy, Woodbury County zoning should be an HOA for what kind of homes are built in Woodbury County. And so I think this policy is regressive towards home ownership and building in Woodbury County. I think we should be pro-homes, pro-families, pro-people living here. And so I would just like to simply send this on to planning and zoning and have them reevaluate and hopefully come back to us with not such an egregious or really any sort of dimensional minimum for any homes or any types of homes in Woodbury County.
Thank you for identifying the issue and both of you for working on it. I think it's a good thing and we should have minimal impact on people's freedom to build as they want to build and to do what they want to do, especially as you related it impacts families and their ability to stay here rather than go elsewhere. So I appreciate you both taking it up.
Any other comments? Questions for Dan Priestley, perhaps, on process or?
And I would add that, just from last week, is that there is an ag exemption. So if I were to hire an employee on my farm, I could have a mobile home on my property for that employee. But if that employee or that same person bought land, they could not build a mobile home. So it's kind of a double standard there that I just don't think is appropriate, but that's how it is currently. So.
Just one comment. We've got a couple of zoning commissioners that were around back in 2008, so I really look forward to kind of picking their brain as far as the rationale where the 23 kind of came from. So I look forward to delivering the message to the commission and starting to dig into it and see what they can come up with. So.
Thank you.
And can you help us remember, are we directing or recommending technically? What is the relationship of the board with?
The way I read into the agenda item, kind of turning the zoning commission loose onto looking at the dimension so they can kind of set up a public hearing, kind of come up with ideas that kind of come from the public, so kind of directing them to run a public hearing kind of process so that they can come back to you with a recommendation on that dimension.
But this should essentially remove regulation, not,
Yeah,
Replace.
that, ideally, yeah, they would have no minimum setback or
okay.
dimensions for a home and just,
I guess for informational purposes and what I'm trying to glean tonight with the recommendation is I think we're looking at the number, but you're looking at either lowering the number or just removing the number.
I would like to just remove it,
Okay.
yeah.
And if somebody wants to place a tiny home and say, hey, that's not a big enough home to be able to place on, we require this or that, especially when you identify as somebody who's advocating building an even bigger home, but it doesn't meet the necessary width, that's just kind of asinine, right? You're like, well, we have a certain width that we really like to see you build, you know.
Yeah, and that does, from a dimensional standpoint, not having building codes on the county, it definitely opens up the vast potential of what someone could come up with for living quarters.
Yep.
So,
And the last thing we want you to do is go out with the tape measure to every single, you know, you probably got better things to do.
And it would be wise to look at what some of the prepackaged tiny homes that you can buy online, what sizes those are for square footage.
yeah.
I mean, I understand that a lot of these zoning requirements were put in because people were upset at people buying acreages and just throwing a trailer home up on it, and they didn't want those. And, you know, if you look at it today, any of those trailers that are now for sale out on, 2 or 3 acres, they're barely worth more than the price of the land. But, it's, governments have pushed those because, they want higher tax values and valuations, but at the same time, there's certain right to, have a home of your choosing, and out in the county is kind of where those homes typically are allowed.
I will say every now and then, I don't have a number, but I think every year I've been here, we've at least had that question come up a few times.
Okay.
Are you friendly to tiny homes? And I basically give them our code section there that the 23 feet is basically what keeps us from having tiny homes. So,
Yeah, I'm glad we're doing this. You had another comment?
Good evening, Tina Bertrand, Woodbury County Treasurer. The only couple of comments I want to make is not to disagree with it. I think that, when we restrict building, in terms of size, length, width, dimensions, can be difficult. Square footages might be something that you might want to look at. But the one other thing to consider is when we talk about tax base and increasing tax base, tiny homes are not taxed the same way mobile homes are. So just a consideration when you're kind of looking at something holistically, looking at, planning and zoning for some items, there are other items that this board might want to keep in mind. Now, a mobile home outside of a mobile home park is taxed as real estate. So it is taxed like any other normal home in our community. But I think sometimes we lose sight of some of those little details. So I'm not saying that tiny homes should be excluded. I just want everybody to understand that the taxing on that is going to be different.
Can you explain that, Tina? What do you mean by that? Less tax or more, or what?
Less tax.
Less, okay.
So
Okay.
mobile homes right now are taxed on like a square footage based on age, and it's like $3 or $4, $5, $10 a square foot, the newer it is.
Okay.
But that's if it's in a mobile home park. If it's outside of a mobile home park, it's taxed just like any other site-built home. So if it's a 1,200 square foot home has an assessed value of $100,000 in that particular area, then that mobile home's probably going to be taxed at the same property tax rate. We would collect it in the same fashion as property taxes. Tiny homes, however, don't necessarily follow the same thing. Neither do trailers. So true campers and things like that, which I think I just heard somebody bring up. That might have been a concern years ago, that people would buy a lot or an acreage and put a camper up. So those are not taxed. And if they are not driven and they're not registered, so they get registered like a vehicle, then they don't necessarily pay any kind of tax at all. And so those are some things that you do want to keep in mind when I hear statements like, well, it can increase our property values, our assessed values, there is somewhat of a classification to keep in mind, and not, a home with wheels on it, they're not equal across the board.
They'd pay tax on the land, but not on a camper or on a tiny home on wheels. Yeah. Yeah.
Correct. And so if somebody has, what's a tiny home? And tiny homes right now, nationally, are an issue for all states on how they monitor, how they tax them, how do they register them, how do they move them from place to place, because mobile homes are very specific on how they get moved from one location to another. Tiny homes are different because their heights are higher, and so they don't always follow the same ability to move from one place to another.
Mr. Taylor?
Well, as somebody who has a family of 9 and has never looked into a tiny home, I didn't realize that it's under 600 square feet, which would currently be prohibited by our ordinance anyway, which is 529. And I didn't realize this, I was just sort of looking this up. So your original point was there's also a width factor, which prohibits somebody right now who wants to do an 1,120 square foot, but it's a width dimension thing. So just what I was saying, tiny homes, I use that term loosely. Should have said small homes, because I didn't realize right now, they probably wouldn't fit. But just food for thought.
And I would agree, limiting a size of a building, dimensionally, it really kind of corners people into building a certain type of home, and that's, I don't think, the intent.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify and just make sure that we have all that information out there, because if we want people to have affordable housing, and yet we still have a need for, assessed valuations, I think we just want a comprehensive one. I think it's, I would be also a proponent of having more building codes out in the county, but that would require a building inspector. Anyway. Thank you. I don't have any other comments.
Thanks, yeah.
Well, I wouldn't think the commission would have any problem with the width being removed. That specific width seems,
Yeah, because they could, if a tiny home is, say, 300 square foot or 400 square foot, they could go with that route and say, well, it's got to be at least bigger than 400, but then get rid of the dimensions, and then people could build however they like,
Yeah.
But, so,
you want to add anything in here about tree houses?
well, that's a fixed structure, so. Okay.
If the tree decays.
I don't know, you
in the
could probably find some
treehouse-
cottonwood trees in the county that are older than the county, Tina, so I would say that they're pretty permanent.
I think the building code, the state code, has what a permanent foundation is, and I don't think a tree
Okay.
with the roots going out would qualify.
Well, that's up to the commission.
If the zoning commission wants to branch out into that, then they can look at that.
Right. Did we have a motion?
I'll move it.
I'll second the motion by Bittinger. Any other comments? All's in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item 11 is reports on committee meetings.
The only one I have is I snuck into Emergency Services, has had a staff meeting yesterday morning, and I've been wanting to get down there, but I wanted Drew to get settled into his new role before I went down there and observed, and they had a great staff meeting yesterday. I'm very proud of the work that he's doing. That department needed a lot of help, and we've got some really good people down there. He's really, he's commanding it. They had budgeted, I think, $40,000 in revenue, and we had questioned why that wasn't more, and there were issues with getting the reports filed after they had got back from calls. And that was one thing that I had talked with Drew about, is that we have to get those done on time because that helps the revenue. And they've almost hit that $40,000 already, and we're not even halfway through this fiscal year. So they're doing great things down there. We've got good people down there. They're appreciative of the support. They're appreciative of the changing the handbook for the wage plan on the sick leave. They were very appreciative of that. So we're just, and the tuck pointing was going on while we were there, and they're moving right along. But good things are happening down at Climbing Hill. So thank you.
Anyone else? Item 12 is citizen concerns. Are there any concerned citizens tonight? Seeing none, item 13 is board concerns. Mr. Taylor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have two. One is that Veterans Day is on Monday, and so the Veterans Affairs Commission invites our board to come. Unfortunately, I'm teaching school and I show up in uniform and talk to kids during that day, so it's important to me to do that, so I won't be able to attend, but was wondering if there may be a majority, might be something that we want to post as a notice of gathering if that happens, and I know anybody who could come would be appreciated by the commission.
I'll be there. I was planning on it. 11 a.m., right? Right. Yeah.
All right, Karen, could you please post a notice just in case?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I definitely won't be there, so. Retail.
Then my other one was just something that I thought we could put on the radar maybe for the next month or two or future board. And that's just kind of looking back at our budget. We have so much predicated on the revenue from federal inmates. And thankfully, now that the jail is completed, I know that's going to be a transition process. But I was talking to Keith about this earlier. I forget the exact number, whether it's $260,000 a month, around $3 million for the year. But with our Veterans Affairs Commission or Siouxland District Health, I know there's quarterly reports, monthly reports, and it may just be something to be kept abreast of in terms of this is where we're at in comparison, just because such a sizable portion, something like 5% of our entire budget is predicated on that. And just to see every either month or maybe 3 months, maybe exceeding expectations. And so kind of forecasting. I know with the unfortunate absence of not having somebody in the budget analyst position right now, but it just kind of to put on the radar for the next 6, 8, 12 weeks, that may be a good idea on a monthly or quarterly basis, just to be tracking for your future situational awareness.
Could be as much as 450,000 a month, so 150 inmates times 100 times 30. If you're done, I did forget that we had, for a committee report, we did have an LEC meeting this afternoon. We'll have another one 2 weeks here, 2 o'clock. We're down to 21 punch list warranty items is all out there, and so we're making great progress. The county attorneys are planning to move over Thanksgiving out there. So we're making progress. Introba is still dragging their feet on the last of the testing balancing issues. We're still not getting information back out of them. It will be 1 year, November 29th, since we started ASI 10 with Introba. 1 year. So it's very depressing, but maybe we can have a party for a 1 year anniversary. But otherwise, we are moving in the right direction. Our mechanical engineer expert that we hired is doing their job for them and continuing to work on that, Corey Metzger. But it's just, I just cannot believe we're closing in on a year on the same problem. So, thank you.
Any other board concerns?
I did get a call about burn bans in the county and whether or not they'll be lifted with 3 days of rain. Emailed Mike Montino on that. He says he gets the direction from local fire chiefs and different professionals in that regard, but I think nothing's going to light on fire right now with all the water in the ground, but I'm not the expert, so if somebody who is an expert paying attention wants to take a look at the burn bans in effect, citizens would appreciate it.
Okay. Is he looking into that right now?
I don't know.
Okay.
I talked to my brothers on the Mobile Fire Department. We were talking about this yesterday, Keith, and that lags a few days behind the weather. So my guess is probably by the end of this week, they'll have it lifted. Woodbury County is kind of interesting. So how those go into place is usually all of the departments agree in the county to have a burn ban, or they can go to the state fire marshal and then he can give a ban for like certain precincts. Because the problem Woodbury has is that we have 2 volunteer departments in the southern part of the county that never want a burn ban regardless of conditions. And so they can't do it. And then they're the 2 that they always have fires and then they call everybody else to come save them. So there's this there's this kind of half-filled McCoys in some of the departments. So this time, they actually went to the state fire marshal because they couldn't get these other two to go with them, and so that may take a little bit of time, but I think it'll be lifted pretty soon, so.
I didn't want to mention, I got a call on dust control and talked to Mark about this for the future essay. So our policy right now is 150 vehicles per day, and the residents' concern was, okay, we're not talking in my area, which is about 80 vehicles per day. We're not talking about Toyota Priuses going by, but major farming operations, double axle. And so just to have something looked at in the future, and said that Mark's been a good supervisor in terms of keeping the pulse of what's going on in rural areas. And although there may not be the appetite for revising the dust control policy in the future, maybe there are certain routes to be looked at when there's major operations that are going on, where there could be some sort of cost sharing, maybe 50-50, where the county and that operator says, to be a good neighbor, we could do this and maybe match something from the county. At the same time, explained with the constrictions of the legislature, there's not a whole lot of money that's just laying around. And so as they kind of tighten the belt or screws, that's going to have to be something that's considered. And so I want to let them know that. Last thing, Dan Bittinger and I are on the roundabout committee. And the roundabout, it sounds like within the next week, minus the vandalism that set us back, that's kind of what we're looking at, unless Mark and Laura have anything. Okay, so wait for the ribbon cutting.
Any other board concerns? We are adjourned.